Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. I do have one quick favor before we get to the video that you came here for, and that is very simply this. You see that little red subscribe button below this video? Go ahead, smash that subscribe button. It really does help me. It really does help this channel grow and my audience grow. So go ahead and hit that red subscribe button. And now, here is the video that you came here for. But let's start with college football. Let's start with the topic of the day. And let's start with just one of the truly both very surprising firings in recent years and not surprising at all. And that is Dan Mullen officially out at Florida. It happened Sunday morning. It happened after another loss on Saturday, this one to Missouri. Greg Knox, the running backs coach, is now the interim head coach. And let me say a few different things. First of all, I am a guy that, as a general rule, I'm kind of the guy that gives everybody the benefit of the doubt. Give him an extra year. Maybe he can figure it out. This is one where I actually think Florida made the right decision in making this move when they did, and I am going to explain why momentarily. Before I do, though, I got to readily admit, I don't ever remember a firing or a situation quite like this one going as sideways as quickly as it did with Dan Mullen at Florida. Never forget, this was a guy that in year one won 10 games in Gainesville. He was the toast of the town. He could do no wrong after the Jim McElwain era. Year two, he wins 11 games, goes to the Orange Bowl, gets a victory there. Even last year wins the SEC East title. And what was crazy was you lose Kyle Trask to the NFL, you lose Kyle Pitts to the NFL, you lose Kadarius Toney. And I remember talking all summer long on this podcast of it's going to be a process. It's not going to be easy. The idea that Dan Mullen is going to go 10-2 again this year is probably not likely, especially with Alabama on the schedule, and that this looks like probably an 8-4-ish type team. What's crazy about it, though, is in week 3, they played Alabama really tough. They needed a last-second goal line stand from Alabama for Alabama to win that game, and you think that maybe Florida's actually better than we think. Instead, they, of course, lose a few weeks later to Kentucky. The thing that really started the snowball down the tracks, if you will, was the loss to LSU when everybody knew that Coach O was ultimately going to get fired. You lose to LSU, you give up 1 million yards on the ground. LSU sets a rushing record. All of a sudden, you're in real hot water, and it never really got better from there. Of course, you lose to South Carolina a few weeks ago. Samford, you cannot get stops. And Missouri, you lose in overtime on Saturday, which finally sealed Dan Mullen's fate. He's on his way out. Now, I told you a minute ago, so again, I just can't believe how quickly this all happened from mid-September. Maybe they're underrated after almost beating Alabama to now Dan Mullen out about 2 months later. With that said, I do think it was the right decision for a few reasons, okay? And as I said, I'm a guy, I generally like to give the benefit of the doubt to these guys. I generally like to give a guy an extra year if I think he's probably the right fit. I love what Michigan did with Jim Harbaugh last year. It's worked out really well for them this year as they're once again a 10-win program going into Ohio State this weekend. I actually like what Nebraska did with Scott Frost. I've said it many times. We don't know if Scott Frost is the guy at Nebraska, but this is clearly probably one of the 30 best teams in college football this year, even if the win-loss record doesn't reflect it. Give him another year. We'll find out a year from now if he's not the guy. But starting over from scratch at this point made no sense, in my opinion, for Nebraska, and I give them credit for deciding to keep Scott Frost in the fold. With that said, I actually think this was the right decision by Florida, and let me explain why. First of all, the program is completely cratering, right? I mean, you look at all the different scenarios that I just laid out. Michigan, last year, COVID, bizarre, weird deal. You go 2-4. Okay, let's get through COVID. Let's give it another year. I think Florida was trying to do the same, but with Michigan last year, you can kind of explain it. Let's shake up the coaching staff. Let's reduce Jim Harbaugh's salary. You can see the scenario why you should keep Jim Harbaugh for one more year. Scott Frost, his team's competing really hard. But Dan Mullen, everything is going in the complete wrong direction. As I said, 10 wins year 1, 11 wins year 2. Last year you win the SEC East, but never forget, you lose your last 3 games last season. You lose as a 24-point favorite at home to LSU in the end of the regular season. You lose to Alabama in the SEC championship game. No shame there. And then he gets smoked by Oklahoma in the Cotton Bowl, where Dan Mullen basically didn't apologize for it. Basically said all my best players opted out. We're just preparing for next year. And so that already started things on the wrong trajectory. And now you're 5-6 this year, which means that in your last overall, your last 14 games as head coach at the University of Florida, you are now 5-9 overall. You lost 3 to end last year, 5-6 this year, and this is who Dan Mullen has beaten since the middle of last year. Like I said, he is now 5-9 in his last 14 games, 2-9 in his last 11 against power conference teams, and this is who Dan Mullen has beaten. Lose 3 straight to end last season. This year, you beat Florida Atlantic, South Florida, Tennessee, Vanderbilt, and Samford, in which you gave up 52 points against Samford, okay? So, you're losing to teams that Florida should never lose to. You lose to South Carolina. You lose to Missouri. You lose to Kentucky, and it's no disrespect to those programs, but we know what Florida has been historically, and everything is trending in the wrong direction on the field. Here is the bigger reason why I actually think it was the right decision to fire Dan Mullen. It is because recruiting is completely in the tank right now, and it's not going to get fixed, okay? And we've spent a lot of time talking about Dan Mullen, talking about recruiting, talking about his role in recruiting. But essentially, if you missed that topic in that conversation a few weeks ago, it really kind of started to snowball after the Georgia game, okay? Dan Mullen has never been known as an elite recruiter. He's kind of been known as the X's and O's guy, the savant, the guy that can get more out of less. But one, he was starting to lose games that if you're the X's and O's savant, you're not supposed to lose, right? Even if you're the X's and O's savant, even if you're not a great recruiter, you're still supposed to beat Kentucky. You're still supposed to beat South Carolina. You're still supposed to beat Missouri. So that's one. But on top of that, it was a very public apathy to recruiting, which I talked about a few weeks ago. Remember, Dan Mullen was the guy, he was asked about recruiting after the Georgia game. Kirby Smart had been asked about it after the game. He basically said, look, I think I'm a good coach. This is Kirby Smart talking now. He said, I think I'm a great coach, but recruiting is the lifeblood of any program. No coach looks great without great players. I owe everything to my team. That was Kirby Smart's response. Dan Mullen's response, 2 days later, I don't talk about recruiting during the season. We'll talk about recruiting after the season. And that was when I believe that he really lost the fan base once and for all, because when you lose to your rival, and you're losing games to teams you're not supposed to, people want answers. And generally, answers come in the form of, we're going to recruit better players. We're going to get out there. We're going to go sign guys. Georgia has difference makers at every position. We need some of those guys. There are ways to answer that question without coming off as a jerk. Instead, it's the exact opposite. Dan Mullen says we don't talk about recruiting this time of year, and that is what I believe sealed his fate. Because at the end of the day, I believe Florida can compete with all these top teams in the SEC. I believe they can compete with Georgia. I believe they can compete with Alabama. I believe they can compete with Texas A&M. But the difference between Dan Mullen and Florida and those schools is exactly what I just said. Those schools have coaches who love to recruit and where recruiting is the lifeblood of the entire program, okay? Nick Saban is Alabama's most aggressive recruiter. Is he in every home? Does he do all the work? No, but at the end of the day, he is the guy that loves to recruit. He understands the value of recruiting. Kirby Smart is Georgia's best recruiter. I just talked about that. Jimbo Fisher is Texas A&M's best recruiter. I talked about Jimbo Fisher when he was linked to LSU last week saying, I'm going to sign the number 1 class in the country. I'd be crazy to leave Texas A&M and go somewhere where I got to play all those guys every year because I know the talent coming in. Even Coach O. You can criticize the on-the-field stuff. You could say he didn't do this. You could say he didn't do that. That guy eats, sleeps, and breathes recruiting, and that is how you win in the SEC. That's really how you win at the highest levels of college football. And Dan Mullen not only showed no interest in doing the hard work in recruiting, he didn't really show an understanding that he had to change. And so when you look at the recruiting rankings, what is going on in the world of recruiting right now, here's everything you need to know. And I tweeted this out on Saturday. But as things stand right now, and part of this is they did get a couple decommitments. Florida got a couple decommitments over the last couple weeks. Florida, as things stand, they are currently ranked number 23. They have the 23 ranked recruiting class in the country right now. Sunday afternoon as I'm recording here, according to 24/7 Sports. 23rd nationally, which makes them 9th in the SEC. That is behind South Carolina under a first-year head coach in Shane Beamer. That is behind Arkansas, who obviously has Sam Pittman. 9th in the SEC, 23rd overall. They are behind Georgia Tech and right ahead of Iowa State and Rutgers. And so the way that Dan Mullen, if you keep Dan Mullen, was going to get you out of this, he wasn't going to recruit you out of it. The team on the field is going in the wrong direction, and he can't claim anymore that he's the schematic genius, because even if you're the schematic genius and you can do more with less, you're still losing to Missouri, South Carolina, and Kentucky. So with that said, that is really ultimately why I am okay with the decision of Florida to fire Dan Mullen. It is because of the fact that he just had a complete unwillingness to admit that recruiting was the lifeblood. He needed to be more committed to recruiting, and his staff needed to be more committed to recruiting. And this is why I don't think you could keep him. If I could sum up everything I've said about Dan Mullen, this is why I believe Sunday was the right time to make the move. The 2023 class is in the 2022 class, this coming senior class in high school, is in a lot of trouble, okay? As I just said, you're ranked number 23 in the country. You're ranked 9th in the SEC. Georgia Tech has a better recruiting class than you. South Carolina has a better recruiting class than you. And Rutgers is closing in on a better recruiting class than you. And obviously, this class cannot be really in any way, shape, or form salvaged. You can still get players through the portal, all that good stuff. But this class cannot be salvaged. Here's why you can't keep Dan Mullen, though. It's because if you keep Dan Mullen for one more year, you know what happens? You're not recruiting in 2023 as well. One, you already have a coach that is not willing to do the work in recruiting. And now you have a situation where everybody knows you're on the hot seat coming into 2023, and there is just no way that Dan Mullen is going to have success on the recruiting trail, even if he picked up, his effort and his intensity and he hired the right assistant coaches. It's going to be hard to sign kids for 2023 knowing what's going on. And so by keeping Dan Mullen this year, you're really losing 2 recruiting classes going forward. 2022 is already a wash. It's going to be hard to maintain any sort of semblance regardless of who the next head coach is. But you keep Dan Mullen, you lose 2022, and you're going to be way behind the 8 ball in 2023 as well. And so while I don't love the idea of getting rid of a guy because of a bad 6-7 week stretch, the record was going in the wrong direction. As I said, 2-9 in his last 11 games against Power 5 opponents. The only wins Tennessee at home and Vanderbilt at home. And the recruiting was the reason that you had to get rid of him. The big question now is who is next at Florida. And what I would say is, by the way, with Dan Mullen, I don't know what his future is. A couple things on Dan Mullen really quick before we get to the to the next head coach. A couple things with Dan Mullen. One, I do believe that he can be a successful head coach at the Power 5 FBS level. I just think he has to do it at a place that isn't Florida and certainly isn't in the SEC. As I said, he's a scheme guy. He's not a recruiting guy. He's not a guy that is going to go sign the number 1 class in the country and in the SEC at any of these great jobs, not just in the SEC, but Ohio State, USC, Oklahoma, Texas, Clemson, Florida State. You need to be committed to recruiting. He is not. But do I think he could have success in a couple different places? Do I think he could be maybe the best offensive coordinator, frankly, in all of college football? I do. Does he want to do that? I don't know. He has a $12 million buyout coming to him, $6 million guaranteed right now today as he gets fired. I don't know if he wants to be an offensive coordinator. But I could also see the scenario where he is a really good coach in, like, the ACC. I think he's done in the SEC. He did his Mississippi State thing. He did the Florida thing. I think he is done ultimately in the SEC. I just don't think it's the right spot for him. But do I think he could be a good ACC head coach? Do I think he could take one of these programs that isn't very good right now and get them to the 8-9 win level? I think he could. I think they could. Now, none of these ACC jobs, except for Virginia Tech, which is currently open, appear to be on the precipice of opening. But could I see him at a Georgia Tech? Could I see him at a Louisville, at an NC State, at a place like that? I could, and I could actually see him being pretty good. So that's my kind of post-mortem on Dan Mullen. I don't wish anybody ill will. I don't hope that a guy gets fired, but I ultimately do think that this was really the right decision for Florida at this exact moment, and it was a decision that they frankly had to make. With that said, let's get to the candidates, because that is part of the reason why you came here. This is why you love this coaching carousel stuff. We don't root for people to lose their jobs, but part of the intrigue is who is next at these respective jobs. And so what I would say about Florida is I put up a post at AaronTorresOnline.com. That's where I do all my writing now. of the candidates that I think are realistic at the University of Florida. I came up with 6. There might be 1 or 2 others. But what I would say about Florida is this. They are obviously heading into a coaching market. I don't believe that they wanted to be in the coaching market right now, but they had no choice with Dan Mullen. I'm blabbing. But if you enjoyed this video, do me a quick favor. Make sure to subscribe to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube channel. Also, make sure you're following on social media at Aaron_Torres on Twitter, at Aaron Torres Pod on Instagram.